Those are a couple negative illustrations. I finish with Exhibit C, and I'll start to move this thing towards a conclusion, which is just a positive statement. It's to say that the shaping of Western civilization itself is a wonderful example, really, of the power and potential of Christianity. Again, I'm not claiming perfection. It's full of this ongoing sanctification of Christianity as a whole. But the fact is, it was a biblical worldview that gave rise to the optimism. This is one of those things where I'm going to say Christianity doesn't get enough credit. It was a biblical worldview that gave rise to the optimism of the Enlightenment and the creativity of the Renaissance. Part of this was corrective as well. It was, I don't know still in school today if when they're studying all of that, they're forced to study for a little bit about Martin Luther, a Roman Catholic monk who stood up and shouted to the Dark Ages and to religious oppression and to religious Christianity that was based on works and selling indulgences and kind of the very worst that religion could become. It was a man of God who stood up and said, "This isn't Christianity," and started a revolution of spiritual experience and thought and an understanding that we're saved by grace through faith and not because we go to the right church, perform the right religious exercises, give enough money, etc., etc., etc. And I'm not saying he was the cause of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance, but I'm saying it was a big part of it, is this fresh light that shined in darkness. And though the Enlightenment became secularized in many ways, it couldn't have occurred outside of the world of Christian thought and practice. The fact is that Christianity has given rise to the most beautiful art, the loveliest music, the most powerful architecture, the educational systems, the healthcare systems that have shaped the world in which we live. And when we tell the story of Christianity, let's not forget to tell that story. Who can imagine Bach without the Bible? And I could go on, trust me, I've got a bunch of stuff here I could talk about in that regard, but we don't want to be here all day, right? Well, Christianity provided the foundation for science. A lot of people think that there is this inherent tension between Christianity or theism at large and science. And there's some deconstructionist history that's gone on that has led to that kind of an idea. The fact is that science arose among medieval Christianity. Dinesh D'Souza brilliantly writes that science as an organized, sustained enterprise arose only once in human history. And where did it arise? In Europe, in the civilization then called Christendom. Modern science is an invention of medieval Christianity. The greatest breakthroughs in scientific reason have largely been the work of Christians. Why? How did this happen? Science is premised on the idea that there is a God who designed and created the world with order and laws which govern it. Science began with the idea that there is an objective idea of truth that can be discovered and empirically tested. Now, postmodernity now is kind of challenging that notion. Science, as we know it, could not have arisen in a postmodern culture. It arose in a Christian culture that believed in a God, a creator, a designer, objective truth. Science could not have existed outside of the framework offered by Christianity and Christian leaders. I'm not going to say that there wasn't challenge and conflict at times in that process, but just don't forget that part when you're saying, well, Christians are the cause of everything bad that's ever happened in the world. You want to fight? Oh, that's not authentic Christianity. I repent. Hey, what about this thing, religion and wars and violence, and again, history has more than its share of terrible examples of sins, and sometimes religious Christianity at certain points back in our history would be more culpable perhaps than anyone else. We've sinned. But I also would remind you that the last 100 years or so, we've seen the world saved. Now this may sound simplistic, but we've seen the world saved by leaders who called themselves Christian and who attempted to sincerely practice Christian faith. What was the world challenged by? Evil Christian leaders? Well, not unless you call Stalin an evil Christian. I think you'd call him the popular term would be a godless communist. It sounds kind of icky to say, doesn't it? But I don't think anybody could deny that. Or Hitler. What was he? A praying man? He was a godless fascist. We could talk about other powerful influences that arose. We could talk about the religious underpinnings of the deification of the Emperor of Japan. And I'm not going to go there because I don't want to criticize other religious thoughts in this regard. I'll simply say that the world was saved by some imperfect men who believed passionately in God and Jesus and the Bible. And you have guys like Roosevelt. Read Roosevelt's prayer. I've given you a lot of reading assignments, haven't I? Read Roosevelt's public prayers. I just finished reading the biography. You better send Bart out. I just finished reading the biography of Truman, the Pulitzer Prize-winning biography written by Macallan. Truman, again, he's not a perfect guy. He's a pretty good guy, actually. But a man, his whole thought system influenced by his raising in Sunday school and his understanding of the Bible and his faith in Jesus. You have Roosevelt and Churchill getting together talking about the Second World War on a battleship, and the biggest thing that happens in their time together is the church service they have, where they sit with a Navy band playing and sing Christian hymns that are filled full of Christian theology and the lordship of Jesus. Well, these guys, they saved the world from systems of thought that were godless. Christianity is not perfect, but I would maintain that in spite of some of our terrible sins, that in spite of our tremendous weaknesses and our failings, that Christianity is ultimately the greatest force for good that humankind has ever known. And I'm not even sure we're started being good Christians yet. I think as a group, we're still being sanctified. We're still recognizing flaws and sins and areas of weakness. And, you know, like one of the great things that's happened in for lack of a better term, evangelical Christianity in the last 10, 20, 30 years is how poorly we've done thinking about poverty. And it's like all of a sudden there's this voice in the church that says, whoa, we're really messing up here. And that's part of what Christianity is the ability to stand up and say, we're really messing up here. And you see this major shift in the Christian church in the last 10, 20, 30 years to say, man, what would Jesus do? 2,500 scriptures in the Bible that deal with issues concerning poverty. It's Christians now. I read a New York Times editorial a few weeks ago. Christians now who are on the forefront, clearly, indisputably, on the forefront of dealing with the AIDS pandemic worldwide. And part of it is the terrible response to some Christian leaders to the beginning of the AIDS situation. Terrible things that were said, and people stand up and say, you know what? That's not Christianity. Have I made my point?